This is a very special class, and I'm gonna talk about the geography, the countries where the language is spoken. Alright. Language is spoken in more than 20 countries, from Europe to Africa and South America. And we're gonna go through each of these countries, and also we're gonna look at their capitals and maybe some additional information about the countries so you get more familiarized with it. Alright? It happens that when you know more the culture of a country, for some strange reason, the way you speak the language also becomes better. It's very interesting. Now let's have a look at the map and learn about the Spanish speaking world. Alright, so now this is the world as we know it, and we're gonna have a look at Spain first of all. Why? Because everybody knows where Spain is. Well, right here in Europe. Now look at this. We're gonna have a look at Spain. The capital is Madrid, and Barcelona is the second biggest city, but Barcelona belongs to the region of Catalonia. Alright, and in this region they speak Catalan, which is their own language. And if you didn't know, in Spain there are several languages spoken. One is Catalan, the other one is Valenciano, which is actually very much like Catalan, but I cannot tell you the exact difference, or if it's just the same but they want to call it Valenciano because of pride. I might be wrong here. Anyways, you know that. Then we have Español, which is Spanish, but you don't specify which type of Spanish because Spanish is the whole country. Well, the Spanish spoken in Latin America in the Spanish international world is actually called Castellano. Alright, so if you in Spanish say yo hablo castellano, I speak castellano, it means I speak Spanish. Just like in Chinese, there is Cantonese, there's Mandarin. If you say I speak Chinese, then you don't specify which Chinese you speak. Well, in Spanish, Castellano is the Mandarin of China, is the national international language. In Spain, Castellano is the Spanish spoken all over the world. But now let's talk about this here. In Bilbao, in País Vasco, there is a language called Basque. In Basque language, it's called Euskera. And it's a very interesting language. Some people claim, they say that it's the oldest language in the world. And it's a very interesting language because some say it's the oldest in Europe, and it has a lot of codes and is the language of sound, etc. It's totally different than Spanish and than any other language you might know. What's interesting about it is that those who know Basque, they say that there are some similarities between Basque language and the indigenous language in South America, like Quechua. I find it quite interesting. Now there's another thing that we want to look at here, and this is, see if we get the name of the region. Alright, we don't get the region here. Well, this region here is called Galicia, and in Galicia they speak a language called Gallego, or a dialect maybe, and they say it's like a dialect of Portugal. Now if you look at Galicia and Portugal, what do you think is similar? Portugal, the port of Gal, and Galicia. Basically, there we see some code, some similarity. Alright, so Portuguese is very similar to Galician language, and Galician belongs to Spain. Alright, that's a lot about Spanish here. And of course here we have the Islas Balnearias, and which are quite famous, Mallorca, Minorca, the Isle of Minorca, and this is Ibiza, the most famous party island in the world. But there is a very small part here, Gibraltar, which is in the north of Africa, in the tip of Africa, which belongs to Spain. Now, there are also the Islas Canarias, the Canary Island, and they are quite far away from Spain if you look at the map. Look at this, very far away. Well, what's interesting is that in the south of Spain, the accent is quite not similar, but there's something similar in the pronunciation of the S and the J, the H, let's say, the H sound, the J is quite similar to South America. But in these Canary Islands, it's very, very, very similar, not just in one letter, how it's pronounced, but the whole, everything how they speak is very, very similar to how they speak in Venezuela. All right, now this is South America, of course, but before we jump to South America, let's have a look at the African country where they speak Spanish. And that country is Guinea Equatorial. It's a very small country. I don't know if it's the smallest country in Africa, but here is where they speak Spanish. All right, quite interesting. Bata is the biggest city and the capital is Malabo, but right now they're also working on a new capital, which is interesting, Ciudad de La Paz. They're creating a new capital city here. And with no further ado, before we jump to South America, I want to say that the accent and the way people in Equatorial Guinea, or in Spanish, Guinea Equatorial, is very, very similar to how they speak in Spain. All right, which is interesting. If you follow the course, you will know that in Spain, they pronounce the Z or the Z and the letter C, A, B, C, like a TH in English. All right, and they do that in Africa as well. All right, but in South America, it's not like that. Every country has a different accent, but many people confuse Uruguay, their accent, with Argentinian accent because they are actually quite similar. Now let's look at Uruguay. So Uruguay kind of divides this part of La Plata, of the river, between Brazil and Argentina. I don't want to touch politics and history, but you might want to look that up. So Montevideo. Now there's a little dispute between Argentina and Uruguay, and that's where the dance, the music, the genre tango comes from. Well, they are very famous, both of them, but the most famous tango singer, Gardel, back in the black and white days, more than 100 years ago, he was from Uruguay. But tango is a great, internationally known dance. What's interesting about Uruguay is that it only has around 3 million people. It's a very small country, but they have always excelled in football, which of course Argentina also has. Now, Uruguay had the first World Cup back when the World Cup was part of the Olympics, before it became just the football World Cup. Now, Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and if we jump over to Argentina, we have Buenos Aires. It's a very big city, perhaps the second biggest city in the Spanish-speaking world. And then we have La Plata, near Argentina, and near Buenos Aires. Rosario is another big city. Cordoba, which also has the same name as another city in Spain called Cordoba. And in the south of Argentina, this part, and in the south of Chile, that part is called La Patagonia. Patagonia is a very big, especially in Argentina, very big open land. Alright, so let's jump over right here, right away to Chile, which is the longest country in the world. Look how it spreads out. And there's something about Chile that I like. For some reason, very weird, maybe it's just me, but I just like the name of a couple of cities. See here, Los Angeles, just like in California. Valparaiso, I like how it sounds, but Santiago is the capital. very European-like city, just like Buenos Aires. And I just like the name of this city, Antofagasta. I cannot explain that to you, but I just think it sounds cool. Then to the north, there's a couple small cities, but here is an interesting part, is that Chile is neighbor with Bolivia and Argentina. And to the north we have Peru. Now, Bolivia had land towards the Pacific Ocean, but there were some disputes between the three countries, and now Bolivia doesn't have. Now, Bolivia itself is interesting because it's highlands, it's in the highlands. So La Paz, Santa Cruz, Cochabamba, the biggest cities, they are up around 3,000, maybe even above 4,000 meters above sea level. All right, so the air is hard to breathe. We jumped over Paraguay, which has a very interesting history. It was a very powerful country, and now it's kind of, people don't know much about it. It's quite interesting, but Asunción is the capital. I also like Asunción, and they're also strong in football. You know, to be honest, I think every country is strong when it comes to football in South America. Now let's go over to Peru. And of course here is Titicaca, one of the biggest lakes in the world, if not the biggest, that is between Peru and Bolivia. Now Peru, of course, the capital is Lima, and it's a very popular destination for a lot of people. Arequipa is another big city, and then we have Cusco, which is maybe the most famous city and most visited city perhaps in South America, for its history and the historical lines in the desert of Peru, which are not right there, but Peru is quite famous for that part. Now let's go over to Ecuador. Another interesting fact about Ecuador is that it has the Galapagos Islands that are right here, where basically they claim that Mr. Darwin came up with a theory of evolution. Now another thing, Ecuador officially was bigger all the way to Brazil, but between Colombia and Peru they made sure that it wasn't. Now unfortunately it became much smaller, but it's very interesting because here we have the Amazon, just like the other countries. Here is the highlands, just as in Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina. They all have the highlands called the Andes. All right, and to the sea we have the tropical area where everything grows. Ecuador is a special country because so many things grow right there. All right, the capital is Quito, is located 3,000 meters above sea level, and then we have Guayaquil, which is the biggest city in Ecuador, is a port. Now we have Colombia, of course, Bogota, the capital, and then we also have other notable cities, big cities, Medellin, Cali. Regarding Ecuador, if you noticed, looking at the Spanish map, Cuenca, there was a city called Cuenca. Just like in Argentina, there's a city called Cordoba, just as in Spain, there's a city called Cuenca in Spain, and in Ecuador too. Alright. Barranquilla is another big city. But what's interesting about Colombia is the only country in South America which has basically borders to the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean. And right here, of course, we have Venezuela, Maracaibo, a big city, and Caracas, the capital. Now, Valencia, there we go, another city just as in Spain. Well, here we go, Panama, famous for the Panama Canal. And a note about the Panama Canal, during that time there were some hats that became famous, and those are the Panama hats, but they are actually from Ecuador, and they were used during that period of the opening of the Great Panama Canal. Now, this is the division between South America and Central America, and in Central America we have Panama City, the capital, and then we go over to Costa Rica. Alright, it's also interesting to mention how the transition from the dialects go. If we go from Venezuela, which sounds just like I said, a lot like the Canary Islands Spanish, and then we go over to Colombia and the way they speak, and somehow there's a transition to Ecuador. And then from Ecuador to Peru, so kind of between, like Peru is a little bit in between the Spanish of Ecuador and Bolivia, but Ecuadorian is a little bit in between the Spanish of Peru and Venezuela. Colombia has quite a singing type of an accent, but it's interesting how the transition happens. Now, Panama is different. I would say that for some reason, Panama accent is somehow a mixture of Colombian and some parts of Ecuador. What happens is that also depending on the region, the accents can be very different. Costa Rica, well, the funny thing about Costa Rica is that they speak with an R that is unusual to, not everybody of course, which is unusual to the R in Latin America. They have an American R for some reason, not all of them though. In Nicaragua, Managua is the capital. Then we have Honduras, Tegucigalpa. El Salvador, San Miguel is a very small country, El Salvador. All the countries in Central America are small, but El Salvador is the smallest one. Then we have Guatemala, another Spanish-speaking country. And what happens here? The capital is Guatemala too, and here we have the border to Mexico. Alright, Belize is an English-speaking country. Now, Mexico actually belongs to North America, contrary to many people's belief or knowledge. Now, Mérida is another big city. Mexico has many big cities. And of course, the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in the world is Mexico City. Alright, we have León, Guadalajara, Monterrey, another very big city, and Hermosillo. Well, San Antonio, this is already Texas. El Paso as well, these are all borders. Baja California, basically Low California, which belongs to Mexico, and then we have Mexicali, Tijuana, which is bordering to San Diego. Now in all these borders from California and New Mexico, Nevada, Texas, they speak a lot of Spanish. Also, of course, in Florida. Many people jokingly say that Miami is the capital of Latin America because everybody moves to Miami, especially people who want to have an extra house, who are living in their country, they have an extra house in Miami, something particular, as opposed to the other parts of the US where people actually generationally have lived. But now in Miami also of course has a great population of Latin speaking, so people treat you and speak with you in Spanish all over the place. And here we have Cuba. Havana is the capital, and Santiago de Cuba is the second city. Now look at Jamaica. What a small country, but still very great and famous for its music, but they don't speak Spanish there. Now many of you didn't know that Dominican Republic is one island together with Haiti, and it's between Cuba and Puerto Rico. Alright, so Puerto Rico belonging to the US. It's quite interesting because it's the place where perhaps they speak the most Spanglish. Now all these islands here, they are not Spanish speaking. Now I want to touch on another thing. And that is the music. Alright, Latin America, of course, is very famous for its music. Now, every country has a lot of production, a lot of music, but there's the biggest ones, of course. There's salsa, merengue, cumbia, that are basically popular all over Latin America, especially cumbia and merengue, and then salsa are very prominent in Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, Puerto Rico. But merengue is from Dominican Republic, but it's also quite popular everywhere. It's a more simple type of dance, and that's why I think it's appealing to a lot of people. Alright, so now we are kind of familiar with the Latin Spanish speaking world, and just a short mention: in the Philippines they have a lot of Spanish names, but they also have some type of a mixed dialect where they have a lot of Spanish words, which I find to be a little bit interesting. And there's also some areas in Lebanon and some other countries in the Middle East where they actually speak an old Spanish called Latin. And it's quite interesting that Spanish has been preserved there for centuries, and they speak it just as it's spoken internationally, and it's very clear and very interesting. Alright, so as you can see, Spanish is spoken in most of the southern states of the US, jumping from Florida to Texas, and then all along New Mexico, Arizona, and California, and then of course Mexico and around the region. There's many countries. It's very interesting. There's a lot of different type of atmosphere, from valleys to beaches and deserts and highlands and tropical areas and cold areas. In Argentina, of course, it's cold, and the south, and Chile as well. So I hope that now you feel a little bit more familiar with the Spanish speaking world. Just a funny note, let's go to this island right here. Now look at it. Look at this island. And now let's go to these islands. Don't they look a little bit similar? Alright, these are the Galapagos Islands, very famous for the turtles and the birds and the nature. It's really amazing. Alright. I hope this is a little bit interesting so that you yourself can explore more and investigate and learn more about each of them. But now you kind of have a foot in, so to speak, to the Latin world. Alright, so thank you very much. And let's stay connected, follow the course. Another thing I want to say is that, to finish, is that even though we are all from different countries, we all understand each other perfectly, and the productions of movies and shows from different countries are shown in other countries. So Venezuela, they used to make a lot of soap operas in Colombia and Argentina, so they are shown, like every country's products are used and shown in every country, so there is this connection. Alright, so Of course, the big countries like Mexico and Argentina, they produce more, so even their slang is understandable in every country. All right, maybe Ecuador slangs or Peru slang or Colombia slang are not as famous all over the place, but the slangs from the bigger countries are quite clear for everybody because of the influence in culture. All right, so that's it for this video. Thank you for listening all the way till the end, and see you in the next video.